Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians and all of our guests. It's good to see everybody today. I am really excited to introduce our speaker for today. Josina has done a lot of work in a lot of different areas, and I'm hopeful that, we have enough time for her to share on her successes, especially where I met her, and that was when I was in the General Assembly. She has moved on from those positions, and I'm just excited about the work that she's doing now. She's a commissioner of Water Reclamation District. She was elected in 2016. She's the first Asian American elected to a county-wide board in Cook County, the second largest county, of course, in the country. She's an urban planner and a policy advocate, and she brings expertise in equity policy, land use, stormwater, and regional planning. She's the founding chair of the Asian American Leaders Caucus. She sits on the National Blue Ribbon Commission for On-Site Non-Potable Water Systems and Binational Great Lakes Commission. Josina's human rights, racial justice, and water justice work has been recognized locally and nationally. In 2007, she was named one of the top 35 leaders in under 35 fighting racism and poverty in Chicago by the Community Renewal Society. She also received the Emerging Leaders Award from the Illinois Campaign for Political Reform and the Breaking Barriers Award from the Chicago Foundation of Women. In 2016, she was named one of 50 young Asian American stars in politics by Asian Fortune magazine. And in 2017, she received the Spirit of the River Award. In 2019, she was named number 22 of the 40 people who make a difference in the last 40 years by Friends of the Chicago River. And in 2018, she was recognized as a national water hero by Water Now. She holds a BA in sociology and international race relations from Pritzker College and a master's in urban planning and public policy from the University of Illinois at Chicago. Josina, I know you're like, can she stop it, right? Josina has done so much for so long, and I am glad to be able to call her a friend and a partner in public service. So Josina, I didn't even mention about those two beautiful children you have.
And Robin got to meet the 2-year-old yesterday.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
So I know that was exciting. But the other thing, we are at Rotary this month, we've decided the Asian Pacific American History Month, and we're honoring human rights and equality. And so with that, I brought this out. Did you get yours?
I got mine. That's so sweet of you.
Okay. All right. And it says
Coke in mine.
Well, I have water in mine. Okay. Now, how do you have Coke? You should have water. Okay, you're the water.
I have 2 kids. I need my caffeine and sugar.
Oh, yes, I agree. Anyway, this says Happy Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, June 2021. And a toast to you, Josina, for all of the great work that you've been doing, not just now, but from before. And I'm excited about your future. So cheers to you.
Thank you, Karen. And thanks to all the Rotarians for all you do.
Okay, Josina, we're going to start with, I want you to tell your story your way. I mean, I know who you are, and I've kind of sort of known where you've been the last 5 years or so, but I'd like you to tell your story for our audience and our Rotarian members.
Okay. Thank you, Karen, and thanks everybody for taking time out on your lunch break to celebrate Asian American History Month and to give me an opportunity to talk. My name is Josina Morita. I'm a commissioner at the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. And I was fortunate to grow up with activist parents. My parents were part of the civil rights movement in California. And I got more involved in social justice work in high school. I grew up in California, and there were a number of anti-immigrant, anti-people of color initiatives that were on the ballot while I was in high school. And so that's how I first got involved as a student activist. I've worked in social justice and nonprofit my whole life. So that's where I first met Karen, when I was running a group called the United Congress of Community and Religious Organizations. We worked on human rights and equality issues. We worked on criminal justice reform, school funding equity, immigrant rights. And it was always, when I got Karen on my list of people to talk to in Springfield, I was relieved, because Karen, as you all know, is always, even if she doesn't agree with you, she is nice, which is always really important, listens, and is always fun. I mean, Karen, as you all know, is probably one of the most fun people I know. So I worked in nonprofit for a number of years doing advocacy work. And I think for me, growing up in California, I grew up in a community with a lot of Asian Americans everywhere, including in politics and in government. And when I moved to Chicago, there really were no Asian Americans in government. And that was something that I was committed to working on the nonprofit side. There's a saying that you're either at the table or you're on the menu. And I felt like my community, Asian Americans, had been on the menu for a really long time and needed a seat at the table. My intention was never for it to be me. I worked to help get other people elected. But eventually an opportunity came up at MWRD, which fit my background as an urban planner and my passion for water as somebody who grew up in California under drought conditions. And in particular, because I had relationships with people like Karen, you know, when you're the first, I was the first Asian American to get slated by the party for a position like this. There was no other Asian American to sponsor me, right? And so it was people like Karen, members of the Black and Latino caucuses in particular, who really championed me and helped me get the support that I needed to become the first Asian American elected countywide. And so here I am, and I chair the Asian American Caucus. You know, I think a lot of people know we've had a really rough year with anti-Asian hate and hate crimes. And so it's been a real privilege and responsibility to chair the Asian Caucus this last year and work with different levels of government to make government more accessible. We thank Karen for her work to this was the first election that we had a ballot in Korean, which was a huge accomplishment. I remember when we came to your office probably 4 years ago to first bring this idea. And so things like that, you know, I think are things that I'm particularly proud of that make government more accessible to communities that haven't had a seat at the table. We just last week, or I guess a week and a half ago, the last few days of session, passed the Teaching Equitable Asian Community History Act. Illinois will become the first state in the country to require a unit of Asian American history as part of K through 12 public education. And so we're really excited about that and really proud of the work that we've been able to do over the last few years as we've started to get more and more seats at the table. So tell me this, because a lot of people really just do not know. You're commissioner on Water Reclamation District. Now, water is important. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about that. But our waterways are important as well. Could you just kind of give us a snippet of Water Rec? Tell us about the work that's being done and why it's important to all of our communities. Of course. I mean, we're so lucky here in Chicago and Cook County to live right next to Lake Michigan, one of the Great Lakes. 90% of the U.S. water supply, 20% of the world's fresh drinking water is in the Great Lakes. So we're incredibly lucky to be here, and we unfortunately have not had a great history of how we have treated our waterways. MWRD is over 130 years old. When we first started, we used to dump raw sewage, animals, you know, toxic waste, everything into our Chicago area waterways, and that's our drinking water. And so we've come a very long way over the last 130 years, that the water that we re-release from our treatment plants, we do storm and sewer water for all of Cook County, is now cleaner than river water. It's so clean. I actually worked with a group a few years ago and made beer out of it. And it was so clean that we had to put bacteria back into the water to actually get it to ferment. So that's how far we've come over the last 130 years, but there's still a lot of work to do. Again, we're so fortunate to live next to the Great Lakes, but also the Chicago River, and we would love to get to the point, hopefully in our generation, where the water is swimmable. And so we also, my office hosts the Big Jump. We jump into the Chicago River every year. Karen still hasn't done it. But we jump into the Chicago River in the Chinatown area where the water is clean enough to swim in. And our goal is to get all elected officials and community members on board with doing the kind of investments and policy change that we need to make Chicago, the Chicago River, swimmable for everybody.
So, Josina, last week during our Lunch and Learn, we had a tremendous panel of leaders from the Asian Pacific community who talked about voting rights. They talked about access to the ballot and many other important issues impacting the immigrant communities. Now, certainly you've been involved, with this for a long time as it relates to human rights and racial justice in your community. What do you see as the biggest issues that are impacting your community right now?
Well, I think in terms of issues, we've seen the rise in hate crimes. We've also, like all communities, been impacted pretty severely by COVID. A lot of Asian businesses are small owned businesses, and so they've been hit really hard by the pandemic. A lot of them have closed down. I know the speaker earlier was talking about a restaurant owner was ready to sell his restaurant. I think that's a common story that we've heard of people who've, had their businesses for an entire, if not multiple generations, who are ready to give up. And so, we spent a lot of work over the last year to make sure that all of the resources that were available, PPP and other small business support programs, were translated into the different Asian languages. One of the challenges that we have is that we have over 60 languages spoken in our communities. And so it is really hard to get information out to everybody. We're also going through redistricting, as a lot of you probably know, and that's something that I worked on. I'm a voting rights mapper, and I helped draw the voting rights map 10 years ago. That included for the first time 4 Asian American districts, cut Chinatown together in a single district for the first time. And as a result, we went from 0 Asian Americans ever in the General Assembly to now 5 in just 10 years. And so that is an important step. I know Karen's office does so much work to get people to feel comfortable and empowered to come out and vote. And, having Asian Americans on the ballot, having Asian Americans in government is a huge part of that push that we are making to make sure that Asian Americans in all communities feel like their vote matters, feel like they can come vote safely. And, the work that Karen's office has done, one, to make it more transparent and accessible in general, but particularly the Korean ballot work has been tremendous for our community. And we hope to continue that work over time to other larger Asian American communities that need it. You're muted, Karen.
This is not really related to your work there, but it is related. Tell me about the Mama Caucus.
Yay! So, 130-year agency. In 2018, I became the first commissioner to have a baby in office. I couldn't believe it. I was the first in 130 years. I thought things that were going to be really simple, like maternity leave and where I could pump during board meetings. I was given the option of the stairwell or the IT closet.
Oh, no.
We had no changing tables, no lactation room at our headquarters that employs hundreds of people. And so I started to reach out to other moms who were also electeds and thinking, oh, maybe it's just MWRD. And came to find out it's everywhere. I mean, Karen, there was no lactation room at the state capitol the whole time that you were there. They just got a lactation room, I think, in 2019. And how many years have there been, moms and women not just serving in the General Assembly, but working in the state capitol, visiting, coming to advocate. And so that's when we got together and, a handful of us, there's more young women running for office who are having babies while in office. And we want to advocate for not just for mom electeds, but for moms across the state. And we've seen the numbers over the last year during the pandemic, over 2 million women have left the workforce. We're back to what they say 1980 numbers of women in the workforce. And a lot of the moms that I talk to, and probably a lot of the moms that you talk to, are not planning on going back. They're like, I can't be a mom and work under these conditions. And some of the things that were really difficult during the pandemic, but there were also some things that were really helpful, like work like this, like Zooms. Things that we were told for so long were impossible for workplaces to accommodate, like working remotely, like Zoom meetings, like flex time are the new norm under the pandemic. And we want to also advocate to kind of hold on to some of those things that can help moms and people who take care of their family and their parents, their spouses, to have that kind of flexibility and still be productive. So we're excited about the Mama's Caucus. We're the first in the country, which I can't believe. But
women have been having babies for a long time, haven't they?
For a little while, for a little while.
And we've all, I was on a panel and somebody asked a question of Toni Preckwinkle, and they asked her, how do you do this balancing act of your family and your career and what have you? And she said something that was very interesting. She said, you know what? A man would never get that question. So, and it is true, but we've been having babies for a long time, right? I think we're the only ones that do, right? Women, kind of, sort of, yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And we can have it all, right? I mean, we can work.
Women have been multitasking. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. But it doesn't hurt for the workplace and government to make it less hard, less barriers. And so we're excited about the Mama's Caucus and all of you moms out there, and even the ones that are not moms, if you want to join on board, have ideas of things that we should be working on. We've been talking about, removing barriers to employment. We've been talking about making childcare more accessible and affordable. We've been talking about self-care, taking care of ourselves and having a support network. So join us.
All of that is good work. And I'm glad you kind of pulled the Band-Aid off of that one, because we have some women on this call, and I think I'm going to call on Michelle. Michelle, you have 2 daughters, and somehow or other you raised those children, and you were working and all of that. What were your experiences?
I was very fortunate to have my grandmother as a great support system. If I didn't have her, honestly, I wouldn't have made it. But it's been very difficult. I raised my children. They probably attended every meeting that I ever went to. And so I think that that's been beneficial for them and their life experiences. It really prepared them for the world of work. And I'm just grateful to women like you, Miss Morita, who've gone before other women to make a way. So I really thank you for making a way for other moms. I think it's very admirable, the work that you've done and the courage that you've had to do that. So my daughters will be standing on your shoulders as a giant. So thank you.
I love it.
Hey, Michelle, do they have lactation rooms at the schools where you served?
I think I used the locker room.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So what? Is Sue on the call? Sue? Oh, there she is. Sue Flanagan. Yeah. Hey, Sue. So Sue's retired from the school district. Do you ever remember lactation rooms and stuff to accommodate?
No, I lived very close to where I worked, and I'd have to go home on lunch.
No.
Absolutely. They
Oh, my.
Any accommodations.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh.
And so, you did what you had to do.
Yep.
Again, having somebody in your family, I had great support from my mother, but having somebody in your family supporting you really helped, like Michelle said. But yes, no, there was nothing. In fact, back in the day, and I'm talking about a long time ago, not when I got pregnant, but before me, it was a very short time before me that when women started to show pregnancy, they had to take a maternity leave because they didn't want pregnant women in front of a classroom.
Mm-hmm.
OMG.
And yes, and so these women, as soon as they started to pop, they had to leave, take their maternity leave, and they couldn't come back until, they had their child. So
Wow.
we've come a long way. Not just, Josina, you're young, but, you think about the last 50 years, how far we've come as far as women and being able to have, having children and companies just helping out. We really have come a long way.
I'm going to ask another mom. Let's see, Carolyn. Carolyn, are you on? I know you have 2 children. Did they have lactation rooms at your place of work?
Yes, so let's see, that goes back to, excuse me, 95 when I had my son. And I was working for the bank. And they did have a room for us. And it was, I think back in 95 was the start of FMLA. However, if you know, in the States, it's much different than Canada. In Canada, they gave you an entire year off. Of course, in the States, you got your 12 weeks, and unfortunately, I had to come off my feet early, and so that impacted income or whatever. So different changes with the health. But as you all stated, women have been having babies for years. But what happened to me was, you didn't want to show that you were expecting because I was in a competitive environment. And you didn't want someone to prejudge you and say, well, I'm not going to put you on that assignment because you're expecting, so we need someone that's going to be here for a whole year, and we know you're leaving in a couple of months. And so you kind of protected yourself, didn't say anything, you didn't mention it to anyone until, I think I didn't tell them until maybe I was about 5 months. So, you go through that. And of course, I had the blessing where my mother-in-law moved in with us. She saw Oprah, and it was a story where a baby got hurt in the daycare, and she called me. She said, don't worry about it. I'll be there. And so she stayed with us, and that's why I learned you can get along with your mother-in-law. That's all a misnomer. Love her. Her and my mother were like this, so it can work. But it was a challenge, and so good for you all with the babies coming along because it goes quicker than you think.
Takesha, have you had any experiences along this line?
I have. I was not fortunate enough to have a lactation room in the corporate world. I had to use a conference meeting room or the mail or file room when I was nursing my son. So it was interesting times, and there was no refrigerator either for storage. So I had to get my own. And as far as time off, you in my corporation at that time, you were forced to use FMLA. There was no allotted time for maternity leave. And I know a lot of companies are still like that today. And that was, 10 years ago. So.
Wow. So Josina, somebody put in the chat, we've come a long way and yet have still a ways to go. This has been interesting to talk about this whole subject. And I think Susan brought up something that I had thought about. And that is, you didn't want anybody to know you were pregnant. And today, right. I mean, you would wear big clothing and all of that kind of stuff. So there's ways to go. So what do you think? Now, it's my understanding that you plan to, take your career off in another way. Now you still got those 2 kids at home and that husband, and I happen to know that husband of yours. But so you plan to run for another office as well?
Yeah, just a few weeks ago, I announced that I'm going to run for county board up here in the 13th districts. I live in the northern suburbs, so Skokie, Evanston, New Trier, a little bit of the north side of Chicago. I love what I do at MWRD, and I feel like the county board is a nice fit because I can continue to do the environmental work because we run the forest preserve. But Cook County also has the jail and the hospital system, and that's been a lot of the work that I've done is around criminal justice reform and healthcare access. And I would get to work with Karen.
You can always work with me. You're working with me right now, so I really appreciate you making yourself available to us today. So I want to open it up for questions for Josina. Anybody have any burning question for her on her job as with water reclamation, or her job as the part of the Mama Caucus, or her job or background as an urban planner and policy advocate? You've been all over the place.
A little busy like you.
Yeah, but you got 2 kids in tow. I didn't have that. I didn't have to do that. I had some of the same experiences that others have had, though. You know, you get pregnant, you surely didn't want anybody. And it's not a sickness, so I don't know why it gets, well, anyway. Any questions for Josina? Daisy? You're on mute, Daisy.
Are you able to hear?
Yeah, we hear you now.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
This is Daisy. Hi, Josina. How are you?
I'm good.
And just want to congratulate you on your accomplishment and your work that you've done. I'm a member with the Hispanic Nurses Association, and we have a resolution that we put on the table. Also with the National Black Nurses Association, you can tell that my ethnicity. But however, I belong to, and I've been with the Hispanic Nurses Association for years. But this year at the national conference, we have a resolution on the floor as it relates to the school nurses and lactation. And I'm just proud and asking for your support. And I want because we definitely need that. And it's not a shame, but most people have a problem with it still in the 21st century. We still have a problem with lactation. But I asking you for your support on that. Also with Illinois Nurses Association, we have a policy that we're proposing that it be implemented, and just want everyone's support, including our clerk, Karen Yarbrough. And thank you,
Without a
Ms.
doubt,
Yarbrough, for your
That means-
support. Okay. It'll be coming out very soon.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So Josina, Daisy works very hard. She's another one. She's an overachiever that's everywhere doing everything as well. I want to ask, let's see, I saw, Robin, here I see. I was looking for somebody who had, although Holly doesn't have small children, but she had the same kind of experiences that you talked about earlier. Any questions for Josina? Okay, I don't see any. I'm wondering about your work. This whole business of people attacking Asians, and where is this coming from? I mean, do you have any idea? I mean, what is it? Your turn? Is that it?
Yeah, unfortunately in this country, a lot of us have taken our turns, right? But, there's a long history. I know a lot of people have been paying attention recently, but my family came to this country in the 1850s. My Chinese side, and we were faced with the Chinese Exclusion Act, and there were mass murders of hundreds of Chinese laborers, back in the 1800s in this country. I just came back from California visiting my great-grandmother who was in the internment camps. So there is a history of anti-Asian sentiment and policy in this country. And unfortunately, I guess it's our turn again. And I think a lot of it did come, unfortunately, with the rhetoric of the last president, calling it the China flu and the Kung flu and, blaming Chinese people for all of this. And, so I think that we're coming off of a difficult period as a country, not just for Asian Americans, but a lot of different communities felt isolated and targeted over the last few years. And, I think that there's a lot of work to do to build unity and to work together across communities, to make sure that we can stand together. Because like you said, we take turns in this country, unfortunately. And there's a lot of work that we need to do to make sure that if it's happening against one community, that we stand together, and that those will stand, with us and when it's our turn. And so really appreciate, your support, Karen, and the support. Particularly, I always say the first people who called me after the Atlanta shootings were members of the Black Caucus, and it's because, unfortunately, Black leaders know what it's like to be targeted. And so, again, I think, working across communities and showing solidarity is incredibly important.
Certainly. Rotary is about helping and doing and going and being. And we have clubs all across the state, the country, and actually across the world. And this has been a part of what we've been focusing much of our attention on as well. There's so much out there that you just want to close your ears to all of it because it's just too much. So I'm going to ask the president. He and his wife have spent a lot of time going over to China and other countries. He has an education background, both he and his wife. So Bob, can you chime in at this point and tell us about you and your wife's foray into this whole, did you see any of that or feel any of that when you were in China?
When we're in China, we hear from children and adults alike a concern for their well-being and traveling here as tourists or in any of our global projects. If there's a shooting in Orlando, they worry about traveling to Seattle. They overgeneralize a bit. This might turn more into a question, but I wonder what the chatter is amongst Asian Americans in relation to potential changes in immigration practices from Asian countries who are now previously were excited about the American ideal and now see through our misbehavior, and that's the understatement of the year, our misconduct, the horrific treatment that we have against our neighbors and fellow citizens. Do they fear that family who might have originally planned to gather together in this country in the future may not want to come to the U.S.?
Yeah, unfortunately, we have heard some of those stories of people who have for a long time had such a great image and perception of America, as this land of opportunity and diversity and freedom. And, unfortunately, particularly over the last few years, that reputation has been tarnished. And I think to see people who look like them be attacked violently has just been so hard for them to comprehend. And yeah, I think a lot of people are discouraged at the idea of coming here. And I've also heard, some who are here as students are going to go home. And I think that's hard too. We're losing talent and people who want to be part of America because of the rise in anti-Asian hate. And it's really hard to see.
Right. And the worst situation is the harm that we do to one another. Yet at the same time, an additional problem is we play into the hands of the propagandists and the communist leaders, dictators, to give them ammunition, so to speak, for their bad-mouthing our nation and our freedom. They say, look what freedom gets you. And
Right.
so we're our own worst enemy when that happens. So what Bonnie and I do is we've brought in over 100 Asian guests now in 2 years to America, and we put them in the homes of folks that aren't going to be mistreating Asians or others, but have a better spirit, and the spirit that we would be proud to have amongst Americans. And they live for a week with an American family, and these are teachers as well as students at the middle school level. And then we give them a tour of our major cities and major universities. And they do go back feeling better about our country, but they're disappointed in what they read and hear in the press. When our politicians get, what should I say? I mean, the politicians say things that are important to say, but sometimes their aim is their own personal self-aggrandizement rather than actually solving the problem. And when they do that, then they kind of, again, hurt our reputation worldwide. Rather than saying, let's roll up our shirt sleeves and work objectively on this problem together, they tend to cast aspersions in order to get more votes. And I'm speaking about both parties, both the major parties.
Yep.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Thanks for sharing that, Bob. Takesha has a question, and she's asking, you mentioned that the Chicago River is cleaner near Chinatown. She's asking why is it cleaner in that particular area versus other areas?
So the whole Chicago River, the northern branch that feeds from our O'Brien plant, which is up in the Skokie area, is a recreational waterway. So our recreational waterways have much higher water quality requirements, and so they've been invested in a way that out near you all, like the sanitary ship canal, is not a recreational waterway, right? And so it was intentionally built specifically to hold sewer overflows and stormwater, which is not cleaner water, and it's not meant to be recreational. And so that's part of the reason that certain areas have been prioritized in terms of cleanup. But again, my goal, and I hope everybody's goal, is to make sure that all of our waterways are clean and accessible this generation.
Agreed. Other questions for Josina? So you can
I'm just going to make a little comment back to the Mama Caucus. Of course, when I started at Proviso, it was 97, and my kids were already grown, and in fact, I was already a grandma at that point. So, but yay, Proviso East, they had a lactation room.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was well used, and in fact, sometimes teachers had to wait in line. So, and they had a refrigerator. So, I'm not sure what year it began, but it's been there at least since 1997, and I know a little bit before. So that was very nice.
That's
Although
awesome
I
to hear.
hear at one point that they made less stalls and made the little room, which was within the teacher's lounge, which could have been kind of okay anywhere in there if you weren't, you knew only women were going to come in. But yeah, I thought, yay, Proviso was thinking there.
Yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
In fact, they for a little while even had childcare for student mothers.
Yeah, I remember that.
So so they actually were right in the same building and can go down and feed their child actually during a break.
That's great.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Bonnie. Thank you. Other questions for Josina? Who do I see here? Any other questions?
I have one for the next generation. I don't know if I just cut someone off.
Somebody,
I can go next.
go ahead.
Well, Josina, I just wondered what your hope is for young Asian Americans that you encounter at, let's say, high school and college level. Are they holding the torch up and ready to do the work necessary to change our world?
I believe so. I mean, I think for all of you who've worked with young people, they are so optimistic and resilient. They have a view sometimes, when they see anti-Asian hate and they've come to me, they're like, they don't even understand it. In some ways, I love that they don't understand it. They don't understand hate. They don't understand racism. You know, they grew up in a world that was diverse and inclusive, and that is their worldview and that is their values. And that makes me incredibly hopeful that the next generation won't have the same experiences and the same challenges. And I see them engaging on social media, engaging in the community, volunteering and being young leaders. And that gives me hope.
Great. Carolyn, Will Height has a question.
Yeah, and this one is one about the water reclamation. And I'm dating back that when I was in high school government econ, we had to tour the water reclamation. I'm originally from Gary, Indiana. So back in the 80s, not giving my age, I look younger, in that tour, I was wondering, do they still do that for high school? Because back then, at that time, Gary did win the national award for being the best water reclamation company because it had the filtration plant right along the lake and all of that. Do they still do that and give out those awards?
Yeah, so MWRD is an award-winning wastewater treatment system. We're one of the largest in the world, and we have 7 reservoirs across Cook County. The McCook Reservoir, which is not too far from you all, is the largest in the world. And so we're really proud of the work that folks do at our plants, and we do still do tours. They've been on hold during COVID. But if any of you ever want to go on a tour, Stickney is the largest water treatment plant in the world. And we have different technology and innovation at each different plant. One that I'm super excited about is that we are partnering with universities and we are tracing COVID in wastewater. I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but you can test for COVID almost a week sooner in wastewater than you can through the mouth swabs. And they're using it in really interesting ways, like they're partnering with universities and they do it in dorms. So they can know a week earlier than even if everybody in the dorm got tested. They know a week earlier without anybody having to get tested if somebody in that dorm has COVID. So it just gives them a week more to respond. It doesn't require everybody getting tested. And Illinois is part of a broader study that is utilizing this new technology. And I think that this is going to be a part of our kind of post-COVID world that we'll be able to test the wastewater in a way that doesn't require everybody to go and get, a nose swab and be able to trace it and to be able to be more proactive and stem any growth of the COVID virus in the future. So that's something I'm really proud that we're part of. I think all of us through COVID, I know you all as Rotarians are programmed to help and find solutions. And so I'm really proud that we're able to be part of the solution coming out of the pandemic.
Good, thank you.
Yeah. Hey, Josina, we're going to wrap up in a minute, but I would like you to discuss repairing the canopy and also rain barrels.
Yes, we are still repairing the canopy. We have oak tree saplings. If any of you would like some, I will happily get you as many as you like. As you all know, there is a lack of trees in Cook County. They help clean our air. They help absorb stormwater. And we are trying to restore that canopy across Cook County and would love to partner with you Rotarians to plant more trees across the county. And I'm also excited to announce that one of my initiatives at the board has been to bring back our free rain barrel program. We did that for a number of years and we put it on hold for a little while and we're bringing it back actually this year. So rain barrels will be free for seniors and they will be half cost for everybody else. So normally you have to pay $100, $120 for a rain barrel. MWRD gets them for $40. We give them to free for seniors, to seniors and $20 for everybody else. So if you are interested in getting rain barrels, let me know. I'm happy to help have my staff deliver them to you.
Wow. Glad I opened up that can.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I have a couple that I got previously, and I need a couple more. And they're really great. The rain barrels are really great because I use them for watering my garden. Of course, it collects the rain. And whenever I want to water my garden or do whatever, I mean, here I have this great big barrel full of water ready to go. So I'm glad that you're bringing that back. And Mr. President, I would like to ask if we could work with Josina on the repairing the Canopy program by planting some of these seedlings and make it a project for us for the Maywood Proviso Rotary Club.
Yeah, Bonnie had just said the same thing to me offline. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Okay. Are these programs open to Cook County residents only, like the rain barrels?
Well, the rain barrels, yes, you have to live in Cook County because that's our jurisdiction. But for the restoring the canopy, we can get oak tree saplings to anybody who lives in Cook County, and you can plant them. We prefer that you plant them in Cook County, but if there's some areas surrounding that need them, we all benefit from all of it.
That's excellent.
Okay, so I know I got some before and planted them, and we made a project of it. So, Mr. President, I would hope that we could do this and help to repair the canopy. It needs repairing. So with that, unless there's some follow-up questions for Josina, let me just thank you, Josina, for taking time out of your son and daughter's life here. I'm sure they're around there somewhere, though.
I'm hiding in my office a few blocks away right now, so you didn't have screening in the background. You can see their art behind me, though.
I see it. Very nice, very nice. But thank you so much for making yourself available. And also, happy Asian Pacific Heritage, American Heritage Month to you. And if we can be of any help, from our Rotary Club, because you're absolutely correct. We do things. We are part of the solution, so we'd be happy to work with you and the initiatives that you talked about. And again, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all.